grad Nike und die Power, doch das macht mich nicht zum Rapper. Das gibt mir nur die Pressure und so ein Vielfaches besser.
Welcome back everyone, I'm Mohammed Rakib from ExploI.T and hope you are all doing good. Port forwarding. Port forwarding is an excellent implementation of NAT or network address translation. Like we talked about NAT, network address translation, that translates a public IP to a private IP and a private IP to a public IP. Port forwarding is an implication of that. The port forwarding is an approach to NAT that saves the public IP addresses by mapping the public IP addresses to a private one and the private ones to a public one by the process of address translation. You know it well because we have talked about this in the NAT as well. The underlying principle of port forwarding is that it maps a combination. The word here is combination. Keep focus on this. It maps a combination of IP address and port address, that is a combination. One is IP, one is port, to another set of IP address and port number. So in NAT, we only have a mapping of one thing. In port forwarding, we have a map of two things, that is a combination. This is done so that we can use and access specific services on the internet that are on the public networks to our private networks. Now let us explain what this line means. So generally, we use services that are publicly available on the internet or through the public network that is wider than the internet, let's guess. So we use everything that is available on the internet, and we also know clearly that everything that we use on the internet needs a public IP address that can be routed by the router or by the ISPs. Similarly, in port forwarding, we know that the public IP addresses are scarce. They are in limited numbers, so we don't want to overuse them or overburden them. So what we use are private IPs and then map them to a public IPs. This is the concept of NAT. Now in this diagram, we have on the left hand side a private network A that uses a private IP. So we have a private network A, and below that we have a port 80. Colon 80 means a port 80 inside this computer or node. On the right hand side, we have a public network B that uses a public IP of 112.54.67 and 13. I have chosen a server because we are going to request something from the server. And below that we have colon 80. Let's say we are using the same port number colon 80 and the server is also replying using this port. In the middle we have the router that serves the application of a network address translation. It converts the IPs of public to private and from private to public. So in the first step, the PC wants to search anything on the YouTube. So let's say it wants to search for how to learn networking fundamentals. So in this case, it is sending a message to the public network or the public server. So it is saying, I am sending a message to 112.54.67 and 13. That is the IP of public server. And then the request goes out of the private network, while the sender's IP address is 192.168.03 and 41 of the PC, and the receiver's address or the destination address is 112.54.67 and 13. Remember this. Once the request reaches the router says, hey, I got a message from a private IP that is 193.168.03.41. This is the node inside my private network. Okay, I know this guy. And then it searches for the destination IP address inside that packet. It says, hey, this is a request for a public IP and I know that the PC has a private IP. So let me convert that to a public IP. So by using NAT or network address translation, it converts the private IP to a public IP using its own public IP that is given by the ISP or the internet service provider to it. So in this case, the router exchanges the sender's private address with its own public address that can be routed on the internet. So here the request is sent out while the sender address is 123.456.789.001. This is the router's public IP, while the destination IP or the receiver's IP is 112.54.67.13, and then it reaches to public network. Now at the last, once the message has been received, the DHCP server or the DNS server or whatever server you made the request to, it says, I got a message from 123.456.789.001. That means it sees the request has come from the router, but it does not know that behind the scenes the actual request has been made by the PC. Once the message has been received, the DHCP server or the DNS server or YouTube server has suggested some videos on learning networking fundamentals on the YouTube. Now it wants to send back the message to the originator. So it is sending the message to 123.456.789.0.0.1. This is the same IP that it got the request from. So in the first step, we have 112.54.67.13, which is the IP of the DHCP server or the DNS server. And then the destination IP, look carefully, the destination IP is 123.456.789.0.0.1. That means the server is sending the acknowledgement or sending the reply to the router. The router, when got the message, it says, yes, I got a message from a public IP. I know who actually made the request, and that was a private IP. So let me convert this to a private IP. Once the PC receives the message or the YouTube videos from the DHCP server, it says, yes, I got a message from 112.54.67.13. That means from the DHCP server. Now in the first half, the PC said something by using the port 80. The DHCP server listens to that thing using the port 80. In the second half, the DHCP server said something using the port 80, and then the host listened to that thing using the port 80. So in port forwarding, the concept is to forward the incoming and outgoing traffic from one port to other port. Thus, it is termed as a port forwarding. That means any traffic that is coming into your network from a public IP or from another public network, it is forwarded to your private network of your port using the helpful services of port forwarding. So it sounds difficult for me to explain, but it is a simple redirection of forwarding the traffic to your ports.